Hello and welcome to New Meta episode 23. Today we're talking about how to play Offlane, and the full crew's reunited, Marco and Adam. Marco, welcome to a special Offlane edition of New Meta. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing great. Excited for this chunky topic.
Yeah, super chunky. Adam, likewise, welcome to the pod. Ready to talk about some 3?
Yeah, big topic today.
Big pod, yeah.
3 pages of notes to get through. Hopefully it doesn't take 3 hours.
Yeah, let's hope so. Because you actually have a day ahead of you, unlike me and Marco, who are, 6 hours ahead, so our day's closing up.
Yeah, somehow we did 82 minutes, just you and I last time. So.
Yeah, it made no sense. I don't understand how that was like a longer episode. It felt like we just talked about... honestly, I think us talking about our game was longer than the actual game.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, so today's the promised episode of learning to play Offlane. Before we do, some roundups, as usual. Adam, I'll start with you because I believe you had your first RD12 League match, was it?
Yeah, our first officials was yesterday, or were yesterday.
God.
Yeah,
Opening
so
day.
We didn't really get to play throughout the week. Last week we 2-0'd Scrim Week, so I was feeling pretty good. And then we were like, let's play some games before our officials. So we played 3, and we lost 3 games.
Ooh,
And we weren't really close. It's like, oh no.
Oh no.
That's
What's
not good.
happening? And then we got into the officials, and the first game we lost in 22 minutes, and it was an absolute stomp. They had a TA that was 10-0, and our AM never got a Battle Fury by the time the game was over.
That's
And we
yikes.
lost all 3 lanes really hard. It's like, all right, let's try this again. And
Pizza
then,
party.
yeah. And then game 2, I'll say game 1 we lost all 3 lanes really hard, but at 10 minutes it was still like 4-8 or something, so it wasn't like the most egregious laning stage ever. I mean, we were behind 4-8 in kills, but salvageable even though we lost every lane. And then the next game we lost all 3 lanes even harder. And at 10 minutes at 10 minutes it was 17-4. We were behind, but we actually came back and won, so it feels good.
That's
Nice.
It's funny, I actually watched this morning some of the games because in the Discord, shout out to the Discord, you've got a your like RD2L team section or whatever. I read it, and you linked to the stream for one of the players on the support of the other team or something.
Right, she
So
streams.
I watched through her perspective. Not all of the games, but like some of it. So that was quite fun. Yeah, you did get worked pretty hard in that first game. That was pretty rough.
Yeah, I didn't even rewatch that one. I did not want to relive it.
The funniest part of the whole thing for me was in the game 2 draft when you pick Oracle at the end and they're like bamboozled and they know what's going on.
Oh,
Well, they realise that it's a bounty core or whatever.
Yeah.
But they're like, oh, come dine with me, Oracle, and I was like, what? This man's renowned around the world.
Yeah, they were kind of a little flamey in their team comms, so it felt good to win. They were calling us idiots and
Really?
Yikes.
and stuff.
NA toxic. RTDL.
I don't know if they were just trying to like hype themselves up, go on this idiot, go on this retard type of stuff they were saying.
That sounds an NMA.
Yeah, but then it felt good to turn it around. We had a bounty hunt. So we first picked bounty hunter, I guess first phase because we were second pick, and then we always had the option of flexing it to one position.
Yeah.
And so when they last picked Bat Rider, like, okay, well, we'll just play 4 Oracle, take off napalm stacks,
Yeah. Seems pretty good.
switch bounty to 1, put Monkey King mid. So, yeah.
What was 5 if Oracle was 4?
Dazzle.
Razzle dazzle.
Razzle Dazzle, 3 Slardar. So
Yeah, that's pretty cool. It was pretty fun.
it worked out. We track golded our way back into it, and I think they got kind of overconfident, and they really didn't build correctly because they had no BKBs. So, whoops. Like if you know what is the best feeling in the world? A troll popping his ult, and then as Oracle, you just press W.
God, yeah.
They just ruins their entire ult, and then he starts to try and go on someone else, and you press W, and he can't attack anyone. And our entire team was physical damage, so it's like I'm not actually hurting anything by disarming him. There were times where their storm would jump in, and he just like melted. It was a combination of like Slardar stun into amplify damage into Slardar bash, and then like a Janeda Deso hit, and he just like 100 to 0 in just like a half a second, and then they had to start to try and run away, and then we just would catch people.
Yeah, well, it sounds pretty fun.
It was fun. Week. Really good to watch from their perspective, because they were like super confident. They're so far ahead, and then they slowly start to get picked off over and over again, and then the track gold starts to come in, and even though we're like 12 kills behind, all of our kills are worth so much more, and they're like, I don't think we're as far ahead as we are. And then a Night Raw is like all chatting, he keeps spamming, this guy has no chill, man, and they start to get upset. I
saw at the end of the second game when he asked, like, can you call it ? And all chat. I was like, gee,
wow.
That's yeah. Well, Marco, how have your games been going recently?
Nothing quite as exciting as the first game, R2DL. Been playing quite a bit, nothing super significant. I think in my last chunk of games, I've gone something like 13-12, so I've really not gone anywhere. There's nothing too notable to say. I was looking at my match history, and I've played... My most notable hero is Wyvern. When again, I get slapped on support, or when the enemy team has a draw, I really like getting a Wyvern.
Right.
Because
you get a lot of easy kills that way.
You can get a lot of big, easy kills, and then you've also got good save with your Cold Embrace. But yeah, getting pickoffs with Wyvern when they've got a draw is so satisfying. And one of my preferred heroes.
You seem to be getting in a lot of high games, like an unusually high amount for someone. So you're ranked about 2,000, right? But yet you're getting in all of these games of rank, triple digit. It can't be normal. I don't know why, because I don't think that's normal for a rank 2K to just be chucked in. It seemed like every other game you're the highest rank.
Yeah, like the lowest.
As in like the lowest MMR sort of thing.
Yeah.
Which is kind of bizarre.
It's it's a bit rough, because it is a bit rough. It's like Night Raw said when he was trying to play something and he was in these really varied games. And when you are in these really varied games, it can be hard sometimes, because you're now playing in this like high 6K average game. So obviously you're like out your depth a bit. And so it's not like a normal... You play rank to have these really like close matched games, but quite often that's not the case, and it can be like really swingy sometimes, like stomp or not stomp.
I was going to say also, it seems to me it's so swingy based on what your MMR is. So when you've been at your highest MMR, say whatever that was, what was it? Or what is your highest MMR? Like
6.2?
Yeah. So when you're 6.2, you're getting in all these super high games. You drop like 200 MMR and you're down to like 5.9 or like 6.0. Suddenly you're in these rank 3K games sort of like 3 times more often than these high games. So it's clearly like a threshold around that rank 2000.
Yeah, there's definitely a threshold. And it is kind of, it feels slightly more common to me in these super high ranked games, which can be a bit naff sometimes, because you often get shoved on support when you're literally the only 4-digit rank. But, bring out the Wyvern, it's fine.
Yeah. My games briefly, bit of a mixed bag really. I'm like Marco in that my games about a month ago were terrible for like as in I tanked loads of MMR, but then like recently I've basically just been spending a lot of time going nowhere. I had a game yesterday that was one of the most fun games ever. I had that dream Tusk game where literally every spell you cast is a kill.
Yeah.
Just the dream Tusk game. Soaked up an MVP performance. That was a feels good. And then my last game, I played a Storm Spirit and got MVP again. So that was pretty hype. But then this morning, I had 2 dreadful games where I just like felt useless, and that sucks. And I kind of I didn't lose my mid lane, but just like rough games. I was on a Viper, and then I was on, what did I just play? Like a Wind Ranger, and it just felt grim, and I couldn't really do anything. And
yeah, I hate those Wind Ranger games when you feel like your hero's not strong enough to do anything.
It was a weird game because I was picking into. Sorry for these clicks. I had absolute last pick, and the enemy team was Morphling, Clinks, Centaur, Tinker, Venomancer. So I was like, I don't really know what's going on there.
Yeah,
and obviously, Wind Ranger's really good, in my opinion, against Clinks and Morphling, and pretty good against Tinker. Once you get a Blink Dagger, it's okay. Like, you have the potential to catch him, which is like important. Yeah. But he's terrible against Centaur, like really bad.
Yeah, really bad.
Because you kill yourself. But I was like, against that lineup, surely the Clinks, the Morphling, and the Tinker have to be core. So I was like, I'm not going to not pick Wind Ranger because there's a Centaur position 4. So I'm just going to pick it because it's good against their cores. Anyway, they end up running this position 5 Clinks, which is like, what?
Oh, God.
I have seen that before. I've played with that before on my team.
It's not actually that bad because you get XP and then you just ult. And for a 5, you have like okay impact. I mean, it's bad, obviously. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying it's good, but it's not as trash as you would have thought. But then basically the game went long, and we had a Troll Warlord carry who was 2, 5, and 7, like just couldn't do anything. But at the end of the day, we had Wind Ranger, Enchantress, Rubik, and Shaman. And then their Morphling gets an E-Blade, and it's like, okay, we just get one shot.
Yeah,
like 4 of our heroes get one shot. So that's kind of rough. So yeah, had a couple of annoying losses this morning. So that's basically me. I really want to get like 3 heroes to play in ranked, because at the moment I have such a wide picking pool that it's just not good. It's way too wide, yeah. There's honestly about 20 heroes that I pick in all pick in the last sort of like 2 weeks or something, 3 weeks. Anyway, that's enough of our games.
I just want to say I tried Tusk yesterday, and I had the opposite game that you had, where every time I cast a spell, I died. That was 4, 18, and 11. It just felt very, very fun.
Oh, 4, 18, 11.
Yeah.
I want to try and find, just before we move on, I'm going to find my score on this Dream Tusk performance.
Orb of Venom was not the play, because I just took so many right clicks and just died.
Yeah.
It was actually not that tanky. Probably should have got a Stout Shield.
Orb of Venom, whether or not to get Orb of Venom on Tusk is always interesting, because it's so costly to start with it, but I did in this game. But yeah, I had over 1 kill involvement per minute in this game, so that was pretty fun. I had 34 kill involvement in 24 minutes.
Yeah, that's tasty.
Yeah, it's pretty tasty. And I was 103 at 1 minute 59. So before 2 minutes, I had 4 kill involvement. Anyway, that's enough of me loving my own Tusk performance to make me feel better about losing games.
I just tried out all sorts of 4s. Like, I was like, oh, I'll play these 4s before, series.
Yeah,
like, Try to Sand King, dog trash. Try to Doom, dog trash. Try to Tusk, dog trash. I'm like, oh no, what's going to happen?
Yeah. Offlane, the way we've chosen to break down talking about Offlane is basically to go over more or less the objective of an offlane at its purest form, and that's, I've written this down as get levels, get gold, and disrupt the enemy carries farm, sort of in that order of importance. Would you two have anything to say about that before we get any further? Is that more or less what you think offlaner's job should be?
What, for the whole game, or
no, for the laning stage?
Okay, laning.
For the laning stage.
Oh, we're just talking early game right now.
Yeah. So we'll just start basics. As in, I was going to say, what's the objective of your offlane in the lane, and then talk about the different ways of doing that.
Yeah, I think the way you know that you've lost the offlane is usually experience. So I would say getting levels is pretty big. I mean, that's what
Yeah.
makes you relevant later, is if you have spells. But if you're like level 2 and they're level 5, obviously you've lost.
Yeah. I think a lot of people think that the offlaner's job is to primarily disrupt the enemy carry's farm, but actually getting your own levels and then getting your own gold as much as possible is probably more important.
Yeah, I think putting levels first is actually definitely true, and all because you could easily think, oh, I need to get gold or I need to disrupt the enemy more, but actually with levels, because when you're talking early and mid game, you can make big impact without gold, but with levels, rotations or ganks, and then also with levels, when you start transitioning into the mid game, you use your spells to find the farm that then gets you the gold. So I think it's quite nice to put levels and experience as number 1, and then your gold number 2.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm glad we've got that agreed. And then I've written types of offlaners, or I suppose we've all written, but types of offlaners. I've split them into 3. You guys can give your own superior opinion subsequently, but the first type of offlane that I've thought about is like these man-up Russia type heroes like Legion Commander and Axe, Brewmaster, Beastmaster. The heroes that basically the way they play the offlane is to man up, run at you, and force the enemy carry back out of the creeps, basically.
Yeah, so
as a method of winning the lanes.
Yeah, you can also, I would agree with these 3 different categories we'll go on to. You can also see it as a spectrum of aggression, and these man-up rushers are definitely your most aggressive kind of heroes, like Axe, Legion, Broom, Doom.
Yeah. I'll talk about pokers, and then Adam can bring us to beefy boys. But pokers, another style. These are like, so I've written heroes like Windranger, Pugner, Nature's Prophet, Venno, Puck, Weaver, Ench. And they're basically the way they will play the offlane and win is get right clicks off, get, just poke, hence pokers. And usually have kiting or escape spells or spells that help them trade really effectively. And the way they win the offlane is basically forcing lots of regen and zoning out enemies because they're just being poked to the point where their health's just depleting. It's super hard to stay in the lane.
Yeah, I would say these don't trade. I obviously know the point you're making, but why pokers are so good is because when they do a trade, it's just a one-way trade.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's definitely worth saying for sure. Think about a hero. Yeah,
you shouldn't be playing Windrunner or Puck and like both taking an equal amount of damage, because these heroes that we've listed, like Windrunner, Puck, Pugner, Ench, Venno, these are squishy heroes with like squishy health pools and don't have armor or stout shields or whatever, or healing capability. They want to be taking trades where it's a one-way trade, whereas someone like a man-up rusher like Elsie or Axe or Brew go for a 1v1 right-click war. Their spells and attributes will mean that the right clicks against your right clicks are going to come out way more favorable.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, you're not wanting to trade in the sense of you're not wanting to take any damage yourself, hence poking. Adam, I don't know if you want to talk about Beefy Boys.
It's a great title.
Yeah, the Beefy Boys, it's like Underlord, Necro, Bristleback, Centaur, Darkseer, Timber. Some of these can be like solos. I mean, like in the case of a Timber, it's usually a solo lane, offlaner, but
right.
You can like, it's either, so they're all big and tanky, but they also have different, I mean, with Timber and Darkseer, they can chain out or surge out, so they're hard to get after. Also, in the case of some of these heroes, they can shove the wave really hard. So Underlord is always pretty much going to get XP as long as he's not against some like stun plus Monkey King lane or something. You can like shove the wave under the tower, force them to hit it under the tower, and then you can maybe like pull from the jungle camp, reset aggro, or reset creep equilibrium. They're just big. I mean, you're probably not going to get a kill unless you blow a lot of resources, either through like Necro healing or Bristleback turning around. Centaur kind of discourages people from hitting him because now his Retaliate is such a strong laning tool. But that's how you get your levels. It's just shoving waves and being a big boy, a beefy boy, if you will.
Exactly, yeah. These are just fat lads that sit in a lane and soak up the golden XP, and they don't necessarily win an offlane by threatening kills like these man-up heroes that we talked about before. They more do so just by out-sustaining enemies, sitting in creeps, pushing, like Adam said, often nuking waves, and just pressuring towers by just being a big beefy boy. So that's basically
also
how I characterize them. With
the man-uppers and the beefy heroes generally have higher base regen anyways, so all their trades are in their favor just to start with, and then it's like, oh, they have higher health pools also and skills that lend themselves to trading.
Yeah, definitely.
Or like wars of attrition, especially with like Darkseer or Necro.
Yeah, for sure. When I was thinking about the categories and stuff, I was stuck a little bit on common offlaners like Enigma and Sand King, and even Nightstalker a little bit. That's mainly just a shout out to Adam's famous Nightstalker. I couldn't really characterize these. These were kind of like hybrids to me. Not so much to discuss, because we'll be here forever if we discuss individual heroes, but that's just to give them a sort of drive-by shout out, as not everything works this way. Some heroes have their own ways of playing the offlane. Marco, you've been playing a bunch of Sand King, haven't you?
I played him a few times, struggled a couple times, done well a couple times, not gonna lie. He's an interesting one. He's got different skill builds you can go. Like, I think typically you would max your Sandstorm.
Yeah, just abuse Sandstorm.
Say you're against a melee hero, there's argument for just maxing Caustic, where you can get lots of, and you can be quite aggressive with the hero, but in other times you want to be very passive and just get your levels and sustain with your sustain/take no, just poke with your Sandstorm and don't try and get kills until you got levels. Yeah, he's a bit varied, which is why he's in your hybrid category.
Yeah. Also, just while we're still on the sort of foundations of how to play offlane and the different styles, obviously each different style has its own strengths and weaknesses. We can run through them, what we've written down here. But it sort of all makes sense, as I'm sure a lot of people that play offlane will already know. Obviously, these man-up heroes that we talked about, they're going to struggle against heroes that can man up way better than they can, mainly like mega clickers like Ursa and MK. And obviously it's easier to man up against low effective HP heroes, or just really low damage heroes. Is going to make your life a lot easier. Marco, I don't know, what would persuade you or dissuade you to poke? As in, when would you try and play a pokey style of offlane? Versus when would you think is it really bad?
Yeah, the idea of if it's melee or ranged is very important. Makes me think of lineups like Dro +1 range support hero. If you try and go for some like cheeky spell trades, they'll happily take them and just run you down because you've kind of stepped your boundary. Whereas, if you're against a melee core in particular, you've got way more freedom to chip away at them. That's kind of the biggest factor. I guess also you might be dissuaded from poking if you've got good sustain on the enemy team, where you know that your poking will be kind of fruitless. So say you're against a Warlock or Abaddon kind of lane, what I might think is me using spells at levels 1 or 2 and wasting mana at levels 1 or 2 isn't effective enough, and I should wait until I'm level 3 or 4 maybe before I start unloading my mana pool. That's a fair consideration, I think.
Yeah, definitely. No, I agree. The classic poke lane is like a ranged offlaner versus a melee carry. That's like the classic poke them down because they can't hit you and you can hit them. For beefy ones, I've just written that it's obviously harder to play a massive beefy person versus kill lanes. And my Tusk game that I talked about is a perfect example. Beefy heroes tend not to have escape spells. So if you're against, I don't know, like a Tusk Monkey, I already mentioned Monkey as a super right clicker, but honestly, just Tusk anyone. Or another 4 that's amazing at getting kills, I don't know, like shaman or something, Venno or something that can get kills with Gale, then you're going to probably struggle with a beefy boy. And it's really great to play beefy heroes against sustain lanes because they pose absolutely no threat. So you can literally just stand right in the creep wave and soak everything and really pressure them by pushing into their tower as much as possible. So yeah, that's pretty simple. Anything you'd add to that, Adam, about what's good or bad, the strengths and weaknesses of the different sort of archetypal offlaners?
No, I think that hits everything. It's pokey. I hate laning against pokers. I just want to say that. And it's just like Wind Ranger makes me feel so sad when it's against me, and then I'll play it or it's on my team and it feels so trash.
Yeah, I know, yeah.
Such a niche pick.
The position 4 Blightstone Wind Ranger just ruining pubs.
Yeah. Just running, just like poking you from the trees, and then you try and go on her and she runs away and pokes you more.
Yeah. It's the worst.
I would just add my own distaste of Rasta. I know it's not really the offlane or 3, but as a poker, he to me is obnoxious because he hits so damn hard, like an absolute truck, and then zaps you, and you're there, this 47 damage support or like 50 damage carry and just getting swapped.
Yeah. No, Shaman's damage is a bit silly. Please.
Casual Blight on that guy could be interesting. Never seen that before.
Yeah, I haven't seen it on the Shaman. You always see it on these Prophet Wind Ranger pokers, particularly the 4s, but I suppose you could on the 3 as well. It's common for Prophet 3 to start with a Blightstone.
Yeah, that's the 3 we didn't list. We put that in the poker category.
I popped him in the poker.
There we are.
NP,
yeah.
There he is. Finally, just before we move on to like putting these things into practice, one other thing to consider in terms of which one of these play styles you want to tilt towards in terms of man up, poking, or being beefy. Obviously, how your support functions in the lane should definitely affect which play style you choose. A basic example would be, Underlord's a beefy hero, and you want to play him like a beefy boy that just sits, soaks, and pushes out the lane maximum pressure while being hard to kill. But if you've got a Tusk or an Earth Spirit as your lane support, then you can man up and look for outright trades more because you're going to have kill potential with your support. Likewise, if you're a Beastmaster and you want to man up as much as possible, but you've got, say, a Kotor position 4 that's squishy and can't really come forward without putting himself in danger, you might have to be more of a poker. So that's just another layer. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it's a great point to make. Just make sure you don't just think about you and your own game, like, oh, I'm this hero, therefore I'm going to be this aggressive. You have to think, okay, how do I synergize with my partner? And does that mean I'm going to be, I have license to be more aggressive? Or like you say, you might only have a Kotor, so I'm going to be a bit less aggressive and just be looking more to quietly push and farm rather than hunting kills. It's really important to think about.
Yeah, it's like it's layering it on in terms of the way I would illustrate it. You have a hero that's naturally good at one of these 3 styles, as it were, man up, poking, or being beefy. Well, how does the enemy carry and the enemy support affect that? Which is what we talked about when we said, it's harder to man up versus Mega Clickers, it's easier to man up versus low HP heroes, etc. And then finally adding on the layer of your own support. And hopefully with those things, you'll have a very good idea of what's the ideal way for you to play the offlane in that situation. Yeah, given your hero, given their heroes, given your support.
Dota is all about layers, onions, layer 1, creep, etc.
Painting a beautiful picture.
Yeah.
Just because I don't want to leave any note unsaid, given how extensive our notes are, the final example I had was if you're playing a poking hero, and I said Weaver or Puck, but it can really be anything. If you've got, say, an Undying or an Ogre 4 that wants to just get in someone's face and man up more, you're going to be able to... I hesitate to say trade after what Marco said, because even if you've got an Ogre or Undying 4, you still don't want to trade.
No, but you can be more aggressive.
Exactly, yeah, there you go. You can tilt your play more towards getting those clicks in and being more aggressive, exactly. Yeah. So with that groundwork laid, I think we can move to putting some of these things into practice. the first thing we said, or the first thing that Marco you've written here is sort of, do we have kill potential? I don't know if you want to expand upon that.
Yeah, so this would be thinking about an aggressive kind of lane, one where maybe you've got what was the term we had?
Like man up
Man up
kind of
rushes,
heroes.
sorry. Yeah, sorry. Man up rushes, an aggressive kind of lane. So now we want to think about how you can optimize your playstyle to kind of execute this idea of manning up, i.e. find kills or put a heavy amount of pressure on. And one of the most important things that I think this comes down to is your creep control and how you dictate the creep equilibrium. And basically, I think you always want to be in situations where you have the creep wave pushing onto the enemy. You want the creep advantage. This means you've got XP advantage. If 4 enemy creep have died and you've got 2 alive, moving to the next wave, you will have more XP. You will hit the next level faster. And in these early game skirmishes, when you ding your level 2 or your 3, it's a huge power spike over the enemy heroes. Plus, you've also got more meat shield, more damage even from the creep if they're able to hit. So controlling the creep wave is super important if you're in these lanes of wanting to man up and be aggressive. Because if you think about the contrary of, oh, I really want to go and get some kills, but the enemy's pushing in with their creep wave, 2 range creep, they've got XP advantage and all these, and a creep advantage. When you start diving them, say, you're going to be way more prone to dying to just creep damage. The enemies will have XP advantage, so it's harder to get kills potentially. So yeah, creep control I think is really important, and then that can tie into even glyph plays is very common in these kill potential man up lanes, i.e. you creep under the enemy tower to give you that bit more meat shield, pop the glyph. It's a great little tool. Towers hitting the creep as your heroes start running past the tower to the enemies. It's just, it just helps you make these plays happen. A second big point, I think, is understanding the levels and the power spike of levels. Classic example, Tusk. If you hit level 2 and you've now got tag team and ice shards, your kill potential's through the roof because you can now trap someone and then bash, bash, bash. Some other heroes, if you think about, I know this isn't an offlaner, but a great example is Juggernaut, and getting level 2 Blade Fury at level 3 is super critical, or you just might have that on another hero. I'm trying to think of an offlane hero, maybe.
I think someone like Centaur, those are getting your retaliate and say who stomp.
Yeah,
I don't even know what the build is on Centaur these days, but I imagine getting like early points in those levels increases your kill threat exponentially.
Yeah, so you might. Every hero is going to have this discussion about which level do you need, which is the critical level you need to then enable your kill to happen. Basically, it's just really important that you think about that. E.g. Tusk, sometimes you might try and be overly aggressive at level 1 in the first or second creep wave, but then it's not fruitful because you need that second key spell to land the kill. You might be someone like Puck, who you go 202. No, is it 202? No, 220, i.e. 2 points in your orb, 2 points in your way in rift, like full damage build. You might have to say to your support, wait till I get these levels and now I'll have sufficient damage to make a kill happen. So yeah, they're the main 2 points, I think, for this kill potential. Looking to get kills, looking to be aggressive. Control the creep wave or push it when you can so that you have a creep advantage and XP advantage. And also think about dinging your levels, and then instantly you can make kills happen the moment you ding a level. That's not uncommon. That's a very good play to make.
Mm. And it fits nicely because obviously the link being you push your creeps in, you push the creep wave in, you have an XP advantage, you're going to hit these critical level masses, as it were, first, and then you're going to be way more likely to be able to get a kill because you've got XP advantage, you've got level advantage.
Yeah. The classic, absolute classic, perfect scenario you could think of if you were offlane is you're pushing the creep wave such that the enemy creep are going to die and you have 2 or 3 left over. The enemy being dumb goes for goes for a last hit or a deny when they've got, say, 1 creep left and you've got a few, and then you get this last creep ding up to say you're level 2 where you get the stun spell or shard spell and instantly use it and instantly have your creep hitting them and they're blocked in or stunned and you get a kill.
Yeah.
Classic. So it's all just, and it's about being aware of when that spike of power will come and being aware of when you're going to ding your level and being conscious of how are the creep waves like balances.
Yeah, definitely. In terms of how you want to approach a kill lane, Adam, I don't know if you've got anything to add about being in how to sort of play a kill lane, if you know what I mean.
I've definitely started to realize that it's probably better just to be shoving the wave. So I agree with all of that because I don't know how, coming from like a support background, it's always like we need to keep it on our side of the map, right? Or close to our tower. And then from the offlane perspective, it seems counterintuitive to shove it in, but it goes into what Marco says. You hit your levels ahead of time. And I've definitely been on just both sides of that lane where it's like somehow 3 ranged creeps have piled up for the other team pushing into you. And you might think, oh, okay, well, that's going into our wave. It's good. But it's like, no, they're like over a half level ahead of us in XP.
They're about to kill you.
Yeah, we can't actually do anything. It's not like then you can't contest, say, like a rune or like a pool or something, because it's like we have all like 6 creeps we have to take care of before we can even do anything. And it just feels so terrible when you're level 1 and they hit level 2 and you realize that you're not going to hit level 2 for like another 20 seconds. So...
Yeah, for sure. And it is worth saying, this is not always something you want to do, like Adam said, from the support background of wanting to control the wave. It's the same goes, if you're like an underlord sitting solo in a lane and the equilibrium is close to your tower, you wouldn't say, oh, just push it in, like by all means, because we're not talking about static beefy boy lanes or whatever. We're talking about man up lanes where you want to be aggro. If you're an underlord, it's a different play style, right? You want to sit in a wave that's in the best possible position and look at the enemy carry and say, I dare you to come and try and CS because I've got Pit of Malice and Firestorm and a trophy. Like, you can't do anything. So it's definitely, this is something to consider more. You want to tilt towards pushing the wave more so if you've got a super aggressive lane that can threaten kills.
Yeah.
But then the kill lane kind of lends itself to the next point that we were going to talk about.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's just like pushing the safe lane tower, right?
Yeah.
Generally, how it's happened, I've been kind of like liking the glyph dive play. The glyph dive is pretty unexpected, even at low divine. So
right,
you can use that as a way of getting a kill. Usually, a tower push on the safe lane happens from you getting a kill, and then your creeps are always, since you've shoved the wave, your creeps are already there, and you just, like, their support probably can't pull the creeps off the wave, and yeah, it just lends itself to a natural push. Maybe even the carry doesn't feel comfortable, like, just TPing back out right to the safe lane. Maybe they go to the shrine, or maybe they just go behind the trees, and and if it's timed up with a cart at 5 minutes, you can take the tower very, very quickly.
The cart, that's awfully disrespectful to the people that made these catapults.
The siege.
You mean the siege creep?
The trebuchet.
The trebuchet. I wish it was a trebuchet. I wish you have to right click it and unpack it before it can hit towers.
It turns into Age of Empires.
Yeah.
And I guess looking at this, there's one hero that's not on here that lends itself to this is the Wraith King. Get the kill, and then you just pop all those skeletons, and that is the easiest tower. If you say you're level 4, what's that? That's 4 skeletons, and they respawn, so it's like you have 8 skeletons to tank tower shots while your creeps are hitting the tower and they're hitting the tower, and it melts. Really
That's
quickly.
next week's episode, how to take tier 1, tier 2 and racks while there's a team fight with skeletons.
Yeah.
I would stress this point, though, of taking the enemy tier 1 if you're in the off lane And I think it's probably not valued highly enough across all the different tiers of pubs about how important and beneficial it is if you've taken the enemy tier 1 tower down in a reasonable time, e.g. like within the early game general period of time. Really, I think players should emphasize that objective more than they probably already do, just in an average, generally speaking sense, because the value you get from taking that enemy tower down, and so you're stopping. I mean, that's an episode in itself, objectives and taking objectives and why they're good. But in talking about this Offlane episode, you need to have it in your mind that it's major value and game-winning value to get down that enemy tier 1 kind of as soon as you can. Not crazy soon, such that you're just shoving creep waves into the enemy for him or her to last it under the tower like too early on. But like Adam says, if these moments of, actually we've got like a bit of space, 30 seconds of space where I could use spells that help push the tower, or I could just actively nuke this creep wave down such that we make use of this free time to hit the tower rather than just like idly keep CSing whilst the enemy's not even in the lane. Like, you'll get major returns from thinking about getting that tower down.
Definitely. And another thing, this is something we'll talk about later when we talk about the mid game, because one of the topics there is when to leave the lane. But I'll touch on it now super briefly, is especially when you're playing like a beefy boy kind of offlaner, taking the tower is almost like paramount to how you want to be playing, particularly towards the end of this laning stage, right? Because if you're a hero that's not very good at rotating, you need to be running. The whole point of your beefy boy hero is to sit in a lane, soaking up golden XP, and creating space and putting on pressure. And what is putting on pressure if it's not taking the tier 1 tower?
Absolutely.
So that's super important. Another part of that is obviously on these beefy boy heroes like Necro and Underlord, I'm thinking of, particularly Darkseer as well can do this. Cutting the wave, just going around the trees to pick up the wave before the enemy wave, before it passes through the tier 1 tower. So that obviously your creeps naturally just run straight into the tower. That can be an incredible way of putting on maximum pressure. And then that lends itself really nicely into the glyph dive, because obviously the glyph dive's even more effective if the creeps don't have any other creeps to kill. They just run at the enemy carry or they run at the tower glyphed. So you can really crank up the pressure notch by cutting the wave if the chance provides itself. Axe, obviously, another one that does that extremely well. A final point I'll make, maybe as our resident slightly lower MMR player, is do be cognizant of TP rotations when you're really pressuring this tower, and particularly if you're doing dives and stuff like that. Ask your teammates to cool miss. There's nothing worse when you're playing a super effective offlane. You're doing great in the lane. You're really putting on the pressure into this tier 1 tower. There's nothing worse than when they rotate 2 heroes in, kill you and your teammate and maybe one of your other teammates that did a late rotation in. Suddenly the carry's got a game again because he's got a kill or two, and it feels like your whole offlane work's done for naught because you didn't realise that you overcommitted to this tower, or you overcommitted to try and kill the carry, and you're punished. So do be really use brain power to think about missing heroes. It doesn't mean don't put pressure on if heroes are missing. It's just another layer to add to the equation of like how aggressive you should be. So I thought that was worth shouting out, something to think about.
Well, then on the other hand of that, if you see someone on the other team TP out to another lane, then you can just take the tower.
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah, so it goes both ways. Say if you've forced them to TP help mid or TP help their off lane, then you're like, I can just shove this wave, shove this tower with reckless abandon because nobody's going to come.
For sure, yeah. The next sort of type of offlane to discuss that we've got on our notes here is basically what to do when you're against an unkillable lane. So you've gone from a kill lane to an unkillable lane. Maybe the classic example was that you see sometimes, or you certainly used to see a lot, like a spec warlock lane, or basically just a warlock lane, right? It's going to be very hard to kill. And basically how you want to look to play those kinds of lane where you don't have kill potential. Marco, I don't know if you want to lead us off here. You've written some stuff.
It touches on what we said earlier about the different kind of types of offlaners and then the matchups and how you adjust. In this case, if you're against the lane that Warlock's a great example. Even someone like Abaddon or Oracle, where they've got good sustain, heals, etc. Basically, I see this as you in the off lane need to just tone down your aggression. And I think that's the adjustment you should make. And now, instead of focusing on, I've got great killer potential or poke potential, I think when you're against these unkillable lanes, Spec is a really tough hero to kill, for example. Spec Warlock is like a classic combo. I'm trying to think if there are any other quintessential tough laners to go against.
Just whenever, say later in the laning stage, this happened to me yesterday. There was an Ursa that had a Morbid Mask, and I was a Baden. It's like I want to stop pumping him with Mistcoils because it's pointless, right? Because he'll just Morbid Mask back up. That's another type of thing.
Yeah, so the idea that they're unkillable or have got really good heal or sustain means you should put your focus elsewhere, and in my eyes, you should put your focus into just winning the CS war as hard as you can, and eventually getting to this point when you've got hopefully XP gold advantage such that you can maybe a +1 helps you get a kill, but I think more importantly using gold XP advantage to just simply push the wave, push the tower as much as you can, and to get that objective. So it now becomes, rather than a lane of kills or everything, actually, they've got an unkillable lane or a very tanky healing lane. Now I'm going to make my objective more just the macro game, XP creeping and putting pressure on the tower as much as possible. Yeah,
definitely. And putting that into practice, I thought an interesting point that you made to me is when you're going from this kill lane to this, unkillable lane, in terms of using your spells, you might want to throw out a stun, not to set up a kill, but so that you can secure a deny on their range creep, or you can get the CS on your range creep sort of thing. The classic, you see it a lot in the mid lane in early levels, doing the light strike array or the laser from Tinker, not for any kind of kill, but purely just casual harass so that you can secure range creeps and stuff like that.
That's a really good point.
Those things like that, changing the way you use your spells slightly, because the purpose of the lane is different now. It's like you said, to crush this CS war, and those things can snowball nicely. So it's just little adjustments you can make. Another one would be controlling the wave as well. Sure, this tier 1 tower is still high in your list of objectives. In the long term, obviously, if you're against an unkillable carry, it's going to be a lot harder to take that tier 1 tower early. So you might, in early levels, be more coming from the perspective of I'm going to crush the CS war this game.
Yeah,
you're going to be more inclined to try and get an equilibrium that's favourable to you rather than just auto push in lane for XP advantage, because it means less, right? Having XP advantage means less in the immediate term. You want to, as in for the next 10 seconds I have an XP advantage, where it doesn't matter if you can't get a kill. It's better to set up to have waves in really good positions and stuff like that.
Yeah, when I say towers and objectives, say that kind of is more strictly 5 minutes and onwards. It's the way I'm picturing it in my mind. Because like you say, get that creep control where you want it, and just 5 minute not war of attrition, but just macro play. I'm going to get all these CS, and the point of using spells to CS is a really good one. One of the most obnoxiously difficult things to play against, say you're in the safe lane, is when the offlaner is using spells like a stun to get a last hit on the range creep, but then hits you as well. So they're not looking to try and get a kill, but just A, they're using spells to secure last hits, and then B, if they can combo that with harass, that's the most effective way you could be playing the off lane.
Yeah, definitely. I don't know, Adam. Yeah, well, go on. If you got something else to say,
just saying it's this slower paced game that you should be looking to play if you're against an unkillable lane. As for all the points we've mentioned, and also on the flip, if you try to play too fast-paced a game, i.e. too aggressive, and you're throwing your bodies and throwing resources and wasting time and not getting XP and as much XP and gold because you're committing too much to try and land a very difficult kill, you're going to hemorrhage your game quite hard because you're going to be 5-6 minutes in and you've not got those kills and you've not got the CS, so you're losing the gold and you're not getting the XP because you're not getting the like denies and you're not winning that like macro war. So yeah
definitely. Adam, I don't know if you've got anything to add to things you'd want to approach an unkillable lane. How would you play against sort of spec warlock?
Well, I think we hit it. I'm glad we talked about the range creeps because I think that's the most important part of every lane, every offlane versus safe lane, but also especially so in this war of attrition / unkillable lane is making sure you get your range creeps and you deny their range creeps. That's going to be the quickest way you spiral out the gold and XP advantage. And last night, just as an example, in my RD2L match, I mean, we lost this game really hard, but our lane was Sand Sven against Slardar Nyx, and that was just like such a clown fest of me storm hammering range creeps, or what's the Sand King Q called?
Burrow strike.
Yeah, burrow striking or impaling or slithering crushing. I mean, it was just like stuns on top of range creeps for days over and over because everybody was like trying to secure the CS. So because they're just so important. So underrated. Yeah.
Another thing I'd add briefly as well before we move on from this unkillable lane archetype. An amazing thing to do, or one of the common pitfalls of playing against an unkillable lane, is that you have a position 4 that tend to be more roaming style heroes. I don't know, say, you see heroes like Earthshaker and Tusk, like we've mentioned before, popping up a lot. If you're against an unkillable lane, if you can adjust your playstyle to be even more, not necessarily defensive, but not aggressive, like what Marco had been talking about earlier, the slower paced, and not trading resources as carelessly as you would if you want to man up, it can be really nice if you can adjust your playstyle to a point where you can solo lane and your position 4 can go elsewhere. There's nothing worse, like I said, than having a position 4 that's just sitting doing nothing. So that's something that I would certainly look to try and accomplish if I'm against an unkillable lane, is being able to solo, putting yourself in a position where you can even solo.
That's a really good point. And I think there's two I would emphasize two in that. And Earthshaker is a really good example of the offlaner that you need to be careful with your resources, in particular your mana, because that guy's got about 2 fissures in his mana pool. So, or like CMs, you have a classic where Crystal Nova is like 60% of a mana pool or something stupid.
Yeah.
When we say be careful with resources, it's the ideas like that. If you're an Earthshaker using your fissure and against an unkillable lane, they're going to be laughing in their sleep because you're wasting relatively so much resources using a spell that you're not going to get a kill with. So be careful of that. And then, like Stan says, what's great in an unkillable lane is the idea of, say, the 4 rotated away and soloing it. And the reason that can work is because when you're against an unkillable lane, typically this will therefore mean it's not a safe lane that can
it's not
put
kill
aggression
lane
on
itself.
you. Their lane isn't going to be an aggressive lane because by nature it's this unkillable defensive lane. So that therefore warrants your offlaner able to solo, and then the 4 can use his mana and resources more effectively elsewhere. Yeah, really good example.
And the classic example we've name checked a few times, Spec Warlock. I mean, you can happily solo pretty much any offlaner against that. You're going to probably be fine, and certainly a lot of these beefy boy heroes are going to be absolutely fine.
Yeah.
One final shout out I'll do as well for these unkillable lanes. This particularly happens in sort of when you get these weird 1v1 lanes, when sometimes there's an aggressive tri-lane somewhere else on the map. There are cool little creep tricks you can do, like creep skipping and then bringing the creeps into a camp to do funky stuff like that. That's not something I'll go into because it's not something that I have any experience of myself, but it's just worth putting that out there. this is the situation in these unkillable lanes where you're going to have a bit more freedom to try and do funky creep optimization stuff. So I just thought it was worth putting that out there. Final classic offlane example is the true and tested suicide lane, the quintessential offlane when you're basically buggered from day one, and you're outlaned. Perhaps you're solo against a tri-lane, perhaps you're in a 2v2 that's terrible, and basically it would seem wrong if we didn't discuss how to play this offlane. Adam, what do you reckon is what do you think is the most important thing in like a suicide lane, like a super tough offlane?
Your levels.
Levels,
XP.
right?
Yeah, there's certain times where even if you die, it's really not a big deal if the wave's pushing into you. And it's the best thing ever if you die and you TP back and like the creeps are coming to your tower. It's the worst thing ever where you're right outside your tower and then you die and then the creeps go into your tower and you watch all that juicy experience just die to the tower.
That hurts just to hear.
Yeah, so I think getting your levels is the most important thing in a 1v3 or a heavily outlaned 2v2. And I think that gets into something that we haven't mentioned yet, but is really important here. And really, you can get away with it. I say the majority of the time is pulling the second wave. I mean, the first wave you can't interact with now. Until it reaches until they meet. But the second wave, especially as a 4 position, if you just have them grab the wave, a lot of the time they don't have a support that can punish that. So if you have someone like Earth Spirit or really anybody, like a Sand King can do it. Those 2 heroes are pretty cool because they have you can Burrow Strike away or roll away. And then even if they don't get the pull all the way connected, it's kind of like mess with the equilibrium enough that'll make a double wave that'll push into you at least. But you can pull that second wave, creep skip it, and hold it outside your tier 1 and then just reset the equilibrium there. And that will basically guarantee you level 2, I think. And then maybe it becomes easier for you to lane. Yeah,
for sure. It's worth saying Adam's a massive Zai fan. So I think if it was me, I would say you should still feel a little bit bad if you're dying. I mean, it's like Adam said, it's fine to die if it means you've messed up the equilibrium. It's going to come under your tower because ultimately your goal is to get your XP. But I know I've certainly had situations where I'm against a suicide lane and I just die a lot for no real reason, and that's the worst of both worlds, right? Because you're just feeding gold for absolutely nothing. You're not getting levels under your tower or anything like that. Marco, I think you're in agreement with, based on some of the stuff you've written and what we've all written, that in these suicide lanes, often the creep equilibrium is everything, right?
Yeah, I think it disrupting the creep equilibrium, and I mean a lot of what we spoke about is about how to get XP, and so pulling the wave, doing some funky stuff. I know one of the main concepts to think about is disrupting the equilibrium such that you can have the enemy creeps pushing into you. That's step 1, and then step 2 is to do it in a manner where you don't die, because like we spoke about before, if there's a creep advantage and say the enemy safe lane has got their creep pushing into you, they're going to be thinking there's kill potential, or there could be kill potential if the enemy offlaners step out of line a bit too much. So as the offlaner have got to really think carefully about how to play the lane in a way that you can achieve this advantageous creep equilibrium, or have the creep wave push into you so you can CS safely under tower, meanwhile not pushing it too much that you get caught out and die. Ways to play such that you can get this creep wave pushing into you, which is what you want in this suicide lane, so you can get your XP and gold more safely under the tower. So you want the enemy to harass you and to aggro your creep to hitting the heroes. So in this way, maybe you're poking at the enemy, or you're trying to make this kind of like weird trade or poke happen in the creep wave, such that then the enemy's range creep, such that your own range creep start hitting the enemy, or the enemy support might be like to the side a bit, trying to harass you. But then, say if they harass you when you're too close to your range creep, that will aggro the range creep, and then that will mean the enemy creep wave starts pushing into you. All sounds a bit abstract right now, but the key concept is, in the lane of creep, it's the range creep that does the most DPS. So if you can distract, or if you can have your range creep be distracted from hitting creep and instead hitting enemy heroes, the enemy's creep wave is going to push into you. So the way you achieve this is getting the enemy support or carry to aggro your own creep. If that happens, you're in a good spot because the creep's going to push into you. The key is to doing it in a way that you're not putting yourself at too much risk.
Yeah, if you can.
Yeah.
No, I was just going to say, just to summarize, I think what you're saying is, if you can have a quote unquote trade, or like a fake trade, where the enemy naturally, because they're crushing the lane, is going to be sitting in the creep wave right to CS, and you're going to be back from it. If you both right click on each other in that situation, all of your creeps are going to aggro onto their hero. Whereas it's not going to happen in reverse because you're out of the creep wave because you're in a suicide lane. Yeah. Then that means that your creeps aren't going to be hitting their creeps, which means their creeps are going to push, right?
Yeah.
I think that's, sure.
So and I think it's really hard because you're playing a really fine line of if you commit too much, you could easily die.
Definitely,
you've got to commit just enough such that you bait the enemy heroes into making mistakes, e.g. the mistake being they aggro your creep and therefore cause their creep to push into you. Another way you can, I don't know if you have another point, but the other way about controlling the equilibrium favorably is using the hard pull. So if you're in the off lane, if you can pull your creep to the hard camp, therefore the enemy creep will bypass your own creep because you've pulled them, and it'll give you the chance to CS under tower.
Yeah, definitely.
That's another way.
And also in a suicide lane, it's going to be super easy for you to do that hard camp pull. Forget the enemy support might block it, but let's just say in a vacuum, because the creep equilibrium is likely going to be right next to their tower in the normal equilibrium spot. And when it's in the normal equilibrium spot, you're going to be able to do that hard camp pull because your creep's going to be walking past the pull spot.
Yeah.
And you might give them, like, say, a centaur creep or a troll summoner, but it's worth it for you to get your XP under tower.
Yeah, definitely worth it. Yeah. One thing I'll say also, just to dial it back to what Adam was saying about pulling the second wave, the beauty of pulling the wave, or creep skipping, I suppose, is you don't have to drag it to your own tier 1. If you pick up the creep wave anywhere, if you're creep skipping, say, between the tier 1 and tier 2, run around with it for a while, and then just TP back to your tier 1, then the enemy wave will double up because obviously the normal equilibrium spot isn't happening because the enemy creeps are chasing you rather than running to the lane. So that means that when you TP out, all of your creeps have already died under their tower. Sure, the enemy carries CS them all. It doesn't matter because it's a suicide lane. You're trying to get your levels. The enemy's going to get his farm because he's in a massively favoured lane. But suddenly there's this double wave that's going to push into your tower. And that's exactly what you want. So you don't have to, run the gauntlet trying to get this creep train back to your tier 1. You can just run around with it, TP out, and then you're going to get a double wave under your tower. One thing I will say, though, in terms of doing something like that and creep manipulation and stuff, don't think that this is going to get you gold and XP. Like, this is for XP, right? It's not for gold. If there's a double wave, if you're in a suicide lane and suddenly there's a double wave coming under your tier 1, there's a very, very good chance you're going to get dove. So don't think you're necessarily going to be able to sort of show yourself getting all the CS under your tower. This is like a last resort to get your XP. So it's just worth bearing that in mind. These are all to maximize your XP, not necessarily to let you get CS. You need to be really careful about getting dived if you're going to have a double wave under your tower and you're in a suicide lane. So just be very aware of that.
Yeah, generally in a suicide lane, if you can minimize deaths, you're doing good. Like, given it such a hard lane, make number one minimize deaths, and then number two, how do I get most XP?
Yeah.
Generally speaking, you're going to be better off if you've got no deaths than if you've got four deaths and think, oh, but maybe I've got XP. Probably not.
Yeah. No, I definitely agree. You know, maybe if you're a Zai mold Gosu gamer, you know that you can have acceptable losses, but I think in 95% of MMR brackets, you know, minimizing deaths is going to be a much safer bet in terms of how you're going to play this suicide lane. Final point or final bullet point that we haven't talked about, so I'll just talk about it here, is like we've said on the topic of equilibrium, which in this suicide lane, equilibrium is everything, because if the equilibrium isn't disrupted, then you're going to get nothing out of this lane. Is blocking the small camp, either with a ward or with your own body if need be, and this is just to stop enemy support, the enemy position 5, from resetting the equilibrium by doing a pull, right, and getting the, you know, we all know what a pull does, basically just stopping them from resetting the equilibrium. If you think you're in a suicide lane, it can be a worthy investment to buy a sentry ward, or in an ideal world, you know, maybe your support does it for you, but buying a sentry ward or something, especially if you click on the enemy support and they don't have a sentry ward to just insta-deward you, it can be very beneficial to block that small camp and then try and disrupt the equilibrium, and you're probably going to get more value out of it that way because they can't just instantly reset the equilibrium. So I just thought that was worth talking about, and it's something that I never think to do. It's probably something that happens way more the more you go up in MMR, is blocking that small camp. I mean, I don't know, would you guys agree that in a suicide lanes blocking the pull can be important? Or is just a side thing?
I generally, sometimes I just block the pull regardless of lane with that ward, or with my body. Just be really annoying. Yeah. Especially if even if I'm like a safe lane support and that, like a Doom in the offlane, I'll just sit in that camp every minute, the hard camp, so you can't take any creeps. But yeah, you're definitely, if you can block the easy camp with your body or with the ward, you're definitely taking away a resource for the safe lane.
Yeah, definitely less tools for them to play with.
And if you make them dewarded, that's time that the support's not around to be and help the carry. So it's still value.
Yeah, for sure. In terms of vision gaming, and maybe we'll talk about this briefly, but I thought it was worth talking about the kind of vision you want to set up in the offlane, depending on which one of these laning archetypes or which one of these hero archetypes you find yourself with. I think we agreed more or less that in terms of when you want a lane ward, that can be quite a lot of value if you're in these man-up style heroes, and certainly in a man-up style lane. If you're in a 1v1 or a 2v2 sort of face-to-face man fight style lane, you might want to get a lane ward, whereas if you're in a more pokey style lane, or if you're on a hero that is in danger from rotations and disables and stuff like that, it might be more value to get the sort of classic other side of the trees ward, if you know what I mean. I don't know if either of you got anything to say about the kind of vision you want to set up in these different types of offlanes.
Yeah, I think there's 3 choices you could have. One, the most aggressive, being, if you think about, I am in the DotA offlane, I place a ward behind or to the left of the Radiant tier 1. So that's super aggressive, because you can see TPs.
Right.
You mean behind their tower?
Yeah. So you're DotA offlane and behind the Radiant tier 1 in the lane. So you can see TPs really well. And it's really aggressive because you can see people TP, then say go and hide into the trees, say. So, you know, when or if you can like dive and make aggressive plays. The second choice, which is a slightly less aggressive version of that, is just placing it really far into the lane, so not behind the tower. still like in the lane, but just deep in the lane, so that you can see heroes like that just come to the tier 1 and they enter the lane, but it's not behind the tier 1. So it's still aggressive because you're very forward looking, but not as aggressive that you're looking to say have license to tower dive or like go behind the tower and do some really aggressive dive. And then third would be your point about the other side of the trees. So say you're the dire off lane and you think about where the hard camp is, you want something around there so that you can see these rotations.
Yeah, definitely.
And that would be a bit more defensive for the purpose of seeing rotations to kind of keep yourself alive. Or maybe if that's too obvious, because that can sometimes be too obvious, you might want to, rather than just on the other side of the trees, you put it like further away from the bounty, just for the purpose of it not getting dewarded very easily, but for the same purpose of seeing rotations.
Yeah, I've even seen it, like if you're dire offlane, you can do, I guess, near their shrine, or just to see it kind of sees the power rune bot up on that high ground, But that's if you're really worried about rotations.
Yeah.
And that can kind of help. That helps both mid and you. But normally it is the behind the tower, deep into the lane, or blocking a camp / maybe just sitting on the bounty rune.
Yeah, that kind of thing. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, like we said, it depends on what your problems are in the lane and what vision will solve. Right? If you're like a fat underlord that wants to just sit, doesn't have kill potential, but wants to just sit, well, there's not too much value in seeing, say, the deep lane ward route, because you don't really care about that extra vision in the lane in front of the tier 1. Whereas if you're a man-up hero, obviously that's much more important because that's sort of within touching distance, and that's exactly what you want. You can run at them. Whereas an underlord, maybe you want a more, not necessarily on the bounty rune wall, but that kind of style, the one that's sort of around the tree area, the sort of flanking routes, because you really don't want to die when you're a beefy hero. That's sort of the whole point of how you play the offlane. So it's just about thinking about where vision will help you and why. So some maybe worth thinking about is certainly another layer that I'd slap on.
And I think the offlane should pretty much always get the ward. The second ward, it's like mid and offlane should get the wards, not the safe lane. In my opinion.
Yeah, I tend to agree. Drums and then mid game.
Very exciting.
Yeah, wonderful.
We could almost make this a 2-part episode.
I know. Yeah. We'll see how we go. So, mid-game. The first thing about mid-game is, when do you want to start the mid-game? And by that I mean sort of when do you want to leave your lane? Some general rules that I think we can start discussing. Does your carry need space? This is sort of a classic. If you're in an off-lane, particularly if, say, it's gone well, oftentimes your carry won't have had as good a time and needs space to farm. Or maybe he's an anti-mage and it doesn't matter how well his lane went, he still needs space to farm. It's generally good practice to sort of drag heroes away from your carry and you do that by applying pressure, right? And this comes into what Marco was saying about how important this tier 1 and also tier 2, because we're talking about mid-game now, can become. I'll maybe start by saying, if you're a beefy boy and you're not very good at rotating, this is how you create space, right? You just hardcore pressure. Marco, I don't know if you have what would be your initial thoughts on like when you want to leave the lane.
I think when you want to leave the lane should only be because there's a urgent big team fight or skirmish happening elsewhere in another lane, like 3 heroes kind of thing, or B, you've got the enemy tier 1, and in an ideal world you can get the enemy tier 1 with limited help. So like you say, these beefy laners that can do it on their own quite easily, that's the best situation because it means your team doesn't have to be there helping you get the tower. But if that's not the case, and maybe you're like a slower pusher, or you're not someone who can be in the lane on their own, you should make the point to your support, but more likely to your mid, to say that this tower needs to go down like somewhat pronto. Now we're going into the mid game, and I need your presence, your mid laner, to come and help you get that tower. And when that tower's gone, you've now got more license that you when that tower's gone, you should just be boom, automatically shoving that off lane wave, such that you can then be moving through the jungle, off the map, finding kills from other lanes, and then begin the mid game.
Yeah. There are other hero. I mean, you can also take tier 2s. So
I mean, you can then get into that.
There are guys like Wraith King and Beastmaster, even Enchantress. If you go back to with the last TI, where with S4 they would just plop them in a lane.
Yeah, he would never.
And they're just like, you do not leave, and you shove, and you can still do that if you occupy all that safe lane space from the opponent's safe lane. Where are they going to farm? You just cut off the map. Basically cut the map in half. It makes it much easier for your team to apply pressure on the other side, or just get up vision in the jungle for when you do have to leave. You will eventually cause a rotation, but
yeah, definitely.
It's pretty trivial as just a hero that builds Helm of the Dominator or has a bunch of summons, just to plop yourself and just shove.
Yeah, I think this mid game for the offlaner, it comes down to the two ideas of, are you really good at pushing and applying pressure to towers and making space in that way, or are you someone whose tools and skill set mean that you can make skirmishes happen and find kills, into which you then should be looking to assert map control or tower pushes off the back of. I think it's one of the, typically you're looking at one of those two routes.
Yeah, I guess Underlord could do the same thing. He could shove, but also he kind of lends himself to grouping up as a team. Or you could be like the best of both worlds and be a Nature's Prophet and just shove, and then be able to globally TP wherever and help out. But yeah, so it's looking at your skill set. With Wraith King and Beastmaster, they do have great initiation spells with the Roar and the Blast, but they also I guess trend towards being able to do their thing solo. They can shove solo.
Yeah.
The attack speed aura is good for a team with Beastmaster, but he also has summons that get it. So I guess I'm rambling, but it's all about looking at, do I need one more hero here for me to maximize what I'm doing, or can I take up one half of the map with one hero, allowing the rest of our four to play around the other half and take advantage of the map that way?
Also, sticking to the point of, am I this better pusher or team fighter, and what should I be doing? You could be in the case where across the map elsewhere, there is some skirmish business going on. The enemy heroes are concentrated in one area of the map. Say you're a Beastmaster, that kind of offlaner sees that situation, and to me, shouldn't think, oh, loads of enemy heroes there, let's go get involved. To me, he should be like, okay, I'm going to get the tier 2 for free, because my ult, it's great in a team fight to lock one hero down, but in this mid game, particularly the earlier part of the mid game, or just generally mid game, you locking one hero down in a team fight to get maybe a kill on that hero is not as good as you getting a tier 2. On the other hand, someone like a Mars or a Tide Hunter, don't you dare be right-clicking that tier 2 as a Tide or a Mars when the enemy team is concentrated and forcing a fight elsewhere. Yeah. If you do that, oh my god, you should get banned from the game. That's the kind of hero where you should be looking to take these big team fights where your spells have massive multi-hero impact. And then off the back of that team fight, say you wipe it, maybe you get a Rosh, maybe you get a tier 1. That's the kind of mindset a different kind of offlaner should have.
Yeah, I just feel like with Beastmaster, it's only rotate if you can counter initiate, kill, and then transition that into towers in the new lane that you're in, right? Or in the Rosh. Say you TP tier 1 mid, get a kill. Okay, now we just go take the Roche because I'm here and I can't go back to the lane I was just in.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the only reason to leave.
Yeah, I'll just agree with everything you said and re-emphasize, it depends on like the kind of hero you have, like what you've been saying, how you want to play your lane and when you want to leave on a Tide and a Mars. For the reasons Marco outlined, it's super different to if you're a Beastmaster or even, I don't know, like an Underlord who's gone Helm Dom. It comes into like how good is your hero at rotating. Beastmaster, sure, in ideal world, you can rotate well with Primal Roar and turn it into a tower. That's great. But sometimes if you rotate and the fight's dissipating, it's like, well, I'd be doing so much more work for my team in this mid lane if I hadn't, and I was still getting this pressure in this tier 1. Another thing I'd say in terms of this situation in that your carry needs space, well, you putting on maximum pressure onto the enemy tier 1, your objective is in that sense is not so much to literally kill the tier 2. It's to like force rotations, force heroes onto your side of the map, i.e. not on the other side of the map where your carry is. That's, you sort of won already, even if you've done that. You don't have to get this tier 2 literally. You're just trying to create space. And on these beefy boy lane sit in kind of heroes, that's how you do it, is by putting on this maximum pressure and not dying as well. Like, the whole point of the beefy boy is to not die, so you're not going balls to the wall to get this tier 2 to quote unquote create space. You're just trying to create pressure to force heroes onto your side of the map, which frees up the other side.
And that frees up farming for your carry or your mid, and frees up also, not frees up, but helps assert map control as well. So space and map control, although they're not the exact same thing, they can be linked a lot. So if you're pushing that tier 2 and you're forcing enemies to come elsewhere, it means maybe your support's got more room to go D-ward or put wards up, or you can now farm lanes out further and therefore create map control like that. So really big, important macro aspects. Also, just jumping a step back to Beastmaster, he's a really interesting one with his ult, because in my eyes, so say he rotates rather than pushing a tier 2 to use his ult in a team fight, to me, it's only justifiable if that ult was landed on a position 1 or 2. Yeah. Because, he's got a low cooldown ult, so it's great to keep it on cooldown, like using it all the time. But if you're kill securing with your ult at position 3 or 4 or 5, that's not super high value in the grand scheme of things, say relative to a tower. But if you could kill secure like an enemy mid that's balling out of control, or a carrier that's doing really well, that then adds more justification.
Yeah, for sure, definitely. Another thing is about how good your hero is rotating. Some offlaners that don't hit a tower very well, like a Bat Rider, or like a Slardar, say, if you're running him as a 3. If you're one of those heroes, you can feel more free in leaving the lane in a proactive way rather than a reactive way. In the sense that you can group up with 1 or 2 heroes, smoke, say, and try and find a pick off, because that's like what your hero's good at, right? Rather than pushing. And that's how you're gonna, that's how you want to start the mid game. That's why you want to leave your lane.
Before the smoke or the movement, shove that lane, shove your waves. Yeah. And then that gives you a minute or 30 seconds of bit of map push and information, and you use that to then go have a bit of freedom to smoke, find a kill, or whatever. Yeah.
One final thing, and we actually are going to have to do a part 1, because it's going to go too long. We're definitely not going to get through everything. But I'll say my grand plan in a moment. But one thing we've written down here is if your carry doesn't necessarily need space and is like faster paced, like, I don't know, like
a troll with a Vlad,
yeah, or like a Lycan, say. In those kinds of situations, then you can feel more freely to do that kind of what Adam was saying, the rotation into push, because naturally you're going to be better at grouping up in the mid game because you've got this super hard, fast-paced carry, and then maybe more so in that. I don't know. Well, you can ask you, but if you're a Beastmaster in that same situation, you can feel more free to press that TP button to get a kill into an objective, because you know that objective is going to be way easier to get because of how quick your carry is. Maybe even get a tier 2.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. The alternative case, or the contrary case to that, would be, say your carry was a spec. You do not, if you were playing spec, you do not want your Beastmaster TP into your lane and going, all right, spec buddy, let's push this tier 1, tier 2 and force all this attention and like enemies to our lane to defend it. The spec would be like, what the hell are you doing? Like, give me spell space from being elsewhere on the map such that you drag heroes away from me because I need to farm for 20, 25 minutes.
Definitely, yeah.
So, yeah,
that's super important.
I agree with that point.
One final layer as well that we just written here is, in those situations, you might, when you've got a fast-paced carry, you might want to build those early pushing items, right? It just makes sense. The Vlads, the mechs, the Greaves, the pipes on your Doom, maybe, rather than going Midas Blink on your Doom.
Yeah.
It's just another layer to add in there in terms of itemization is probably something we'll talk about in the late game, which will be in the part 2 that we'll hopefully do a follow-up on soon.
Yeah, I was going to say the second major point to the mid-game in my eyes is thinking and understanding what your correct itemization is.
Before you continue, do we want to do this?
Or couldn't we do a Tuesday, Friday?
Yeah, well, I was thinking in the ideal world, the patch comes out and we do a half-half. Second half of this episode plus patch review would be the dream.
Yeah, I think even if the patch doesn't come out, we'd be fine and we'd have something.
Yeah. So I don't know if you want this. The point here, I don't know if you can see me highlighting, but the point you've written about the key crux, we could that could be the first point of the next one. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, because to me, the second big thing of mid game is items,
yeah,
and how that feeds into playstyle, and then it leads into the late game.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So tell you what, we'll leave it there then.
I think that's a lot of value in making it 2 digestible chunks as opposed to
I think so.
A giga ep. A giga ep.
It's still a giga ep already, to be fair. So yeah.
Among a giga ep.
Yeah. So yeah, that's the dream. The Friday patch review / part 2 of the Offlane episode. That's the new meta dream. Marco, you're the official Mars tester, right? As you claimed on a previous pod, so you need to give Gaben a call
to get the patch out.
Yeah, tell him to get the patch rolling.
Roger that.
Rest in peace, Mars as we know it.
Yeah, we'll have to have asterisks on all of our part 2 points with this new weird patch that changes Offlane or something. So we'll see. But yeah, that's part 1 of our Offlane ep. If Gaben complied... Well, actually, to be fair, we'll follow it up on Friday regardless. We'll fit it in. So, yeah, the Friday ep will be the second half of this ep. So I hope you can join us again there. Happy hunting in the Offlane, fellas. And we'll see you again shortly. Bye.
Bye for now.
Seb.